Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to All About Sports. Today we discuss our MLB National League predictions for this upcoming season. Last season, the National League was a bit shocking as the wildcard Washington Nationals, with only 93 wins, went all the way to the World Series to beat the Houston Astros in Game 7 to win their first World Series in franchise history. I'm your host, Luca Vitale, and joining me today is Ryan Gledhill. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing pretty good, Luca. Trying to stay entertained in these times, but hope you're doing well. And I'm ready to talk about some baseball here.
All right, let's get to it. Let's shift our focus now to the NL Central.
Yeah. Hey, Luca, just what's that little poster in the back right there?
You know, those were the glory days in 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series. Now we're talking about
You want to talk a little about that?
line.
you want to talk about that a little bit?
If I must. So we're talking about the Chicago Cubs. As much as I love the Cubs, we are facing the decline. They missed the postseason last year altogether. They had 84 wins, 78 losses, and they missed the postseason last year for the first time since 2015 when all of our fans were like, this is a dynasty. So we come into this season, they are actually looking old on the pitching side. You got John Lester. He was a great signing. Don't get me wrong. This is last year. You got Yu Darvish. He's not old, but he still has a lot more years, and he has still more to prove, in my opinion. You got Jose Quintana, who's been up and down last season. I don't think he's going to be productive at all this season. You got Tyler Chatwood, who is wild.
Tyler Chatwood walks like 5 to 6 guys a game, and that's just – I don't know how he's still in the major leagues. I don't know how he's a starting pitcher.
Yeah, I don't know either, but that's.
I don't know what kind of Jake Arrieta the Cubs think they got, but Jake Arrieta is gone.
Yes, he is gone. He's on the Phillies. Credit to him for signing a nice deal with them, but I feel like he should have gotten more. But he has been a little shaky, but he may get better. I don't know. But I can tell you this about the Cubs. They still have a great core in Chris Bryant, Anthony Davis, Baez, Wilson Contreras, you name it. They definitely have a still good core in them, but
Did you say Anthony Davis?
Did I say Anthony Davis? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez.
There we go. How could Cubs fans forget, Luca? Come on.
We're not talking about the Lakers today, people. I'm sorry. But, yeah, they parted away with World Series winning manager Joe Maddon, and they replaced him with David Ross. I like that idea. It's just that I don't feel like David Ross is set up for success with the pitching staff. I'm also not confident in their bullpen. So –
As much as I love Grandpa Rossi, I love watching him in the World Series. You know, he was always just this wholesome guy. I don't know what the Cubs were thinking. You know, it's still. I understand it. He's like a fan favorite. I get that. He's not. I don't think he has. It's not the best option for a manager. That's the bottom line. You know, it's just not a smart move by the Cubs. It's not a bad move, but it's not a smart move. You know, you're in this position, your baseball team's on a little bit of a steady decline, had a terrible offseason, and you need an experienced manager to get you through this, not someone who retired 3 years ago and is like, you know what, I'm gonna go do that. It's like if Dwayne Wade were to go coach the Miami Heat. Like that I get it, but like that makes no sense.
Yeah, you have a good point there. I think like the fans had a big part in maybe Theo Epstein choosing David Ross as the manager. I get where people are coming from. It may be a bad idea. I don't blame them.
I just flat out don't get it. Like his heart's in the right place. It's just it doesn't work. Maybe they needed a cheap option because they only spent $2.7 million in free agents. Like they just couldn't pay anyone. As we talk about some of the free agent moves, Nick Castellanos, gone. Cole Hamels, not there. Steve Kashek, gone. Pedro Strop, no longer on the Cubs. You know, they really just had no money. And they were darn near dead last in the league for spending on free agents, spending just under $3 million. Maybe they didn't have enough money to get a good manager. You know, maybe they didn't have enough money to kind of bring someone with experience in.
You're definitely not wrong in the free agents. I mean, they didn't sign anyone. They didn't make big news at all. In fact, like the thing that still
most of the news to this day. Most of the big news was bad. It was bad big news for the Cubs fans.
In fact, you talk about the Cubs ever since Dexter Fowler has left the Cubs. They have lacked a leadoff man, and that's the problem with their offense. No one can jumpstart that offense.
Yeah,
And
I can see that. I can see Dexter Fowler was definitely a good leadoff man, but they've had plenty of options. I feel like, the Cubs have had so many options to change what they were doing, and they just really haven't taken those ambitious strides because they were still a little bit reminiscent over the 2016 World Series win. They thought maybe we can salvage some of this. Maybe we can keep the guys together, keep them rallied. Like big changes will occasionally need to happen,
Yeah, for sure. You just talk about, I'll talk about the Cubs a little bit more, and then we're going to move on to a couple more teams. But
if you can't tell, we might be a little biased. We're in Chicago.
We're a little biased. I'm sorry, but yeah. I'm talking about the Cubs maybe winning 2 games over 500 this year. That's it. They won't make any postseason this year. They don't have what it takes to get there, pitching wise. Hitting wise, maybe they can make some noise, but they won't make it. They got definitely some promise in Nico Horner. He will start in Iowa. I can see for the beginning of the season, he'll get called up. He will put up some big numbers this year at the plate. I can see that. But I can tell you this one thing and one thing only. They will miss Nicholas Castellanos for sure.
They're gonna really miss him, and that's unfortunate. But it's kind of the same scenario with the Phillies. I feel like the Phillies and Mets. The NL Central is such, especially with the Reds. They just bulked up. We'll get to them in just a minute, but it's not like they don't have the talent, which they do. Chris Bryant, probably one of the best third basemen in the league. Anthony Rizzo is still a solid player, solid first baseman. Javier Baez, just insane. Javier Baez might be one of the best shortstops. A lot of people say he's overrated. I don't think so.
No.
But it's not. I'm not too optimistic for the Cubs. It's going to be very, very challenging this year. It's not just going to be like it's bad. It's just going to be a little challenging, and they're going to have to really adapt to this. It's going to be tough. I don't see them making the playoffs. I see them floating at 500. Maybe they have a tank. Maybe they have a hot streak. It's really up in the air. But they're not making the postseason.
Yeah, they'll win those useless games against the Pirates and all, but they won't get there. So that's just the end of it.
Oh, man. Speaking of the Pirates, what do you think about those guys?
Oh, the Pirates. They're definitely in a rebuild for sure. They've been struggling. I really like Josh Bell as a player. I think he's a great player.
Yeah. Fabulous player. He's been with the Pirates for a long time too. I think that's a real key. He's going to stick with the Pirates through this. Hopefully something good happens to him because I like Josh Bell.
Yeah, he's a great first baseman. I'm not going to lie. I really like him. He can hit. He can do a lot of different things. It's just I feel like they're off a lot of pieces, and the pitching is just not been good for them. Putting in Francisco Liriano last year, I don't know what that was about, but they're just not doing well. They had I forgot the reliever's name, but he got into legal trouble last year. Just making headlines for the Pirates like that. That's not a good way to showcase your franchise in ESPN.
If the Pirates want to change, their front office needs to make some big changes. The Pirates, they didn't have an explosive offseason. And I get it. Money can be a little tight sometimes, and sometimes you don't make an explosive offseason. Just really looking at the notes here, they acquired some people, but it was really just trade-off for trade-off, It really wasn't much. Lots of minor league deals, which I get. I like the minor league deals, but Pirates were near last in spending. So that just really shows you how much they're kind of struggling a little bit. They're not as bad as the Cubs in spending. They are not as bad as the Cubs, but it's tough for them. Probably they just need to get some of those minor league, get their farm system up a little bit. That's really important, and just try and make do with what they have.
What makes me mad about the Pirates is they traded away Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows to the Rays. You see them thrive on the Rays. They're fantastic. I'm not sure why they traded them away, but I hope they regret that decision.
Yeah, I think they do already. But, again, it could be money. Money has played such a huge part, especially in this series, in this 3-4 year span. I think it all started with more recent World Series winners where we see teams trading to get more power. And, when they win spending the money to win, to set themselves up for success. And it kind of is their downfall. So it could be one of those situations. Maybe the Pirates were really good 5 years ago. Maybe that's what they did, and maybe they're regretting it now.
Yeah. I mean, they got a good pitcher in Chris Archer, but that's it really that I can see.
Pirates, no, I don't think they're going to do much this year.
All right, how about this? Let's talk about someone who's been in the basement in the NL Central but could be rising up in the Cincinnati Reds.
Cincinnati Reds. Nick Castellanos, obviously, from the Cubs. We talked about him a little earlier. I'm really liking the Reds right now. I think that they are they're going to be an explosive team whenever they get back. They've already been a really explosive team. They've just unfortunately have lost some important games, which they have the pieces now to win important games. They had a pretty good offseason, signing a lot or taking a lot of good players. They had a really good offseason. I'm repeating myself a lot, but bottom line, they have pieces to win games. You have a bunch of young talent and you still have a lot of the veteran guys like Eugenio Suarez and Joey Votto. It's very similar to the Braves, a good mixture of young and old. Maybe not as good as the Braves, maybe not as perfectly balanced, but still there's very promising things happening for the Reds. They also just got Mike Moustakas from the Brewers. So they spent the big bucks this offseason. I think it's really going to pay off. That's really all I can say. They were in the top one of the top teams who top in spendings over the offseason. I have really high hopes for the Reds, and I think a lot of people do as well. So I'm very optimistic about the Reds.
Well, I'm also one of those people that's really optimistic for the Reds as well. I'm not going to lie. Every single time I saw Reds something this, I don't think I've ever seen Reds headlines that much this in an offseason as I did this past offseason.
No, absolutely.
So you talk about Mike Moustakas, you talk about Joey Votto. Yeah, they're definitely great players, but the pitching aspect is what gets me on that team. You got Trevor Bauer. You got Luis Castillo. You got another great and Sonny Gray. That's the other one I was thinking. Sonny Gray.
Yeah, Sonny Gray.
Sonny Gray. I remember he is one of those pitchers that just annoy Cub fans because he shuts them down. And I really like Sonny Gray when he was at the Athletics. He struggled with the Yankees, but when he got traded to the Reds, he was putting on a show with them. And I feel like the Reds, pitching-wise, they're in a great shape to be successful for this upcoming season.
Yeah, they've put themselves in a very good spot. And I think they already set themselves up pretty decently last year, especially towards the end, getting a lot of those younger guys experience. But it really is going to be a matter of how fast those guys can gel together and how quickly they can make an explosion in the NL Central, especially. The NL Central is one of those divisions where it's fairly even. First place is never really unattainable unless you're the Pirates or the Cubs.
Yes.
So, it's really going to be a struggle maybe early on for the Reds, but I definitely think they can bounce back and really do some damage.
Yeah, you're definitely not wrong here, but I can tell you one thing and one thing only. Their true competition this year will be the St. Louis Cardinals.
I see. Why don't you go ahead and elaborate on that? I'm feeling like there's some I definitely feel like the Cardinals maybe have lost some of their power that they had or some of their spark that they had from last year. Last year was such a tight division race. No one was really out of it at the All-Star break. If you look at the All-Star break from last year, no real team was out of it, not even the Pirates.
Yeah, they were not.
It was a little insane. And I think the biggest thing with the Cardinals is win the home games and, win the important series, win the important home series, win the important games that you need to, and you're just fine. Obviously, it's a little bit tough. They lost a couple of lost a couple of not big names, but they lost a couple of solid players from last year. Maybe none that's really stirred up the league, but it'll be a little bit of a struggle for them. But I think they're still going to do some pretty big things. It's not going to be as dominant as last year, but they still have a chance.
Right. They do have a chance, and they will not be as good as last year. That's correct. I can agree with that because they lost Marcelo Zuna to the Braves in free agency. So that definitely is a big loss for the Cardinals. However, a lot of the last couple of seasons, I noticed the Cardinals catch fire in the second half of the season. I don't know what it is, but it just happens to be that. And then you talk about important home games and away games, like you said. They somehow, some way, always seem to win those. And it makes me mad, too, because I'm a Cardinal hater. But, yes, you got starting pitching in Jack Flaherty, Miles McCollum. You got Adam Wainwright's not the best as he used to be, but he's still very respectable. So
they still spent a solid chunk on him. They have him for one more year and $5 million. Use them.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like they have lots of potential at pitching again. I feel like Jack Flaherty, the ace, he'll be definitely an ace like we want to see. He was pretty good in the playoffs, but the Cardinals, some of that luck of theirs, but like some of the gas, they ran out of gas someplace, and I don't know why, but they had a good run at the end of last year, so why not try? Why can't they do it again?
Use some of that Cardinal magic that makes Cubs fans real mad.
Yeah, but at least this year maybe they won't make us as mad because the Cubs aren't really supposed to be all that, but we'll see. Something I do like about the Cardinals for sure is Harrison Baker, that right fielder of there, or Bader. I'm sorry, Harrison Bader. My bad. He is definitely a great right fielder. He is something out there, right? He has a bullet to throw at home plate. It's amazing what he can do out there. He has a great bat in him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had another great productive year at the plate. I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's obviously, again, especially with a lot of these teams, especially in the NL Central, it's winning the important games. The Cardinals have been a team where they've been consistently good a lot throughout the years. Like, if you look at the past decade, the Cardinals winning the important games, like they've been a consistently good team throughout, the last 10 years even 15 years, They won a couple World Series back in 2011 and a little back before then, but they really have never been out of the picture. And I think if they can just keep that going but push a little further, they can definitely do some damage.
Yep, I see another good productive year in Paul Goldschmidt, so he's a great first baseman in my opinion, and don't be surprised if he has another 30-year home run or another year with 30 home runs.
Absolutely.
Somebody else in the division that kind of drives the Cubs nuts is the Milwaukee Brewers.
Yeah, Milwaukee Brewers, obviously Christian Yelich sealing the deal with them. Some pretty big gains for the Brewers, but also some pretty important losses. And I think Yasmani Grandal going to the White Sox is a bigger loss than people think. Yasmani Grandal has been the catcher for the Brewers for a little bit now. And, he was with the Brewers for when they had their biggest success. And, it's going to be a little tough without him because, he was really a solid catcher overall. He was there when you needed him to be there. And that personally for me is a big enough reason to just be upset about. But obviously the Brewers have made some pretty big moves, mainly just with Christian Yelich, putting all that money in. But with the Christian Yelich stuff comes with some pretty noticeable losses. Obviously, Yasmani Grandal going to the White Sox, Mike Moustakas going to the Cincinnati Reds, Drew Pomeranz going to the Padres. All those kind of contributed to that Christian Yelich money, and maybe even a couple of others. But it's always interesting to see and it happens with so many other teams. You put a lot of that money into one person, but you have to let some other people go. So a lot of those losses are bigger than you think, especially the Yasmani Grandal one, because he's been their main catcher for the last few years, and it's going to be tough trying to find or fight for his replacement. So definitely the Brewers, don't get me wrong, they still have the power and the ability to do some real damage, especially in the NL Central, as long as they win those important games, just like the Cardinals do. But it's going to be definitely a big transition year for what the Brewers were a couple years ago and what the Brewers could be in the future.
Yep, you're not wrong there at all. The loss of Yasmani Grandal, I think you got Manny Pena, and he hasn't really been playing consistently throughout the year, so that's going to be a surprise at catcher, in my opinion. With Christian Yelich getting all that money in Milwaukee being a small market team already, it's kind of a tough loss seeing all these players go because they are actually very respectable. And someone who I really like in the Brewers is Lorenzo Cain. I really like him a lot at the leadoff spot, someone I wish the Cubs would have snatched at free agency the other year, but they didn't. And he's definitely been a productive hitter at the leadoff spot, in my opinion, for sure. But someone at third base, definitely they need to address at third base. Mike Moustakas played there a couple of times last year, and he played pretty well. Travis Shaw was a disaster last season, if people do not remember. He was in the minors a lot throughout the year. He could not get consistent at bats because he kept striking out a bunch, and I think his average was below 200 last year, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, Travis Shaw got dealt to the Blue Jays, I think.
Oh, he did?
Looking at my notes, yeah, he got dealt to the Blue Jays. So they have had some struggles in the last couple of years, but it's going to be very interesting to see how their farm system plays into all this. They've had a fairly respectable farm system, and maybe it's time to bring some of those young guns up. What do you have to lose?
Exactly. Let me ask you this question now. Who will win the NL Central?
Looking at the numbers and stuff, the common answer would probably be the Cincinnati Reds, and I think that stands true. I think the Reds will win the division. They have all of the pieces they need. They don't need to wait anymore. This is really the year for them to get going, hit the ground running, do whatever they need to do to get themselves a comfortable lead atop of the NL Central. Because Cubs fans can tell you it's not that easy to win the NL Central. I think anyone can tell you it's never that easy, especially in recent years, to win the NL Central. It's always a race. It's always fun to see who will eventually end up on top. But if the Reds really want to end on top, they need to have a momentum that can last them all throughout the season. And I think they can. I think they'll have it.
I'm glad you brought up the momentum part of that, because if they can win enough games in the first half of the season, the Cardinals may not be able to keep up. The Cardinals may not be able to catch them up because the Cardinals do it every single year.
Those wings can only fly for so long.
So if that is the case, then yes, the Reds will win the division. Just my prediction, in my opinion, because it's always the second half of the season where they just get hot at the right time, is the Cardinals. I feel like somehow, some way, they will find a way to win the division again. Paul Goldschmidt, he is nothing but a stud at first base every single year. He will put up just awesome numbers and all. I mean, you can't go wrong with the Cardinals. The Reds, I can see it as well. It's, in my opinion, if it happens to be the Reds, it's not because they won by a large margin of wins. It's because it was that close. So if the Cardinals win the division, is your wild card then the Reds? Yes.
Yeah. I think my wild card would probably be either the Cardinals or maybe the Brewers. Maybe the Brewers win it. I don't know.
If the Brewers win it, it'll definitely be a shock because what happened during the offseason for them, it would be definitely a surprise. The Brewers not looking as hot as they once were.